here again, as we leap into this, I'm immediately intrigued because of its obvious homage to the 60s. But what a graceful watch this is!
It's a beautiful. This is actually from the Space Pioneers collection from Sturmanskie. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Sturmanskie, the first watch in space on the wrist of Yuri Gagarin. This speaks to what we were talking about earlier, Tim, that a lot of Sturmanskie, not all of what Sturmanskie does, but a lot of Sturmanskie, what they do is the throwbacks, homages, bring forwards, whatever terminology you want to use, of the watches from the 60s, steeped in the space history of Sturmanskie. Sturmanskie actually has two big pillars of their history. One is the space exploration, and the other is nautical.
Yes.
And actually going to see some nautical stuff we've got coming out later this year that's just phenomenal. This is, again, not for the guy who wants the big watch, who wants the one that's going to scream off their wrist. This is an elegant timepiece. This is a classic
tiny,
timepiece.
By the way. It's 42.
It's not tiny, but it is, and it's not thin either. I mean, it's certainly substantial on the wrist, and the fact that the dial runs all the way to the edge of the case, and so forth. This is, again, for the collector who wants that true Russian timepiece in their collection, that wants the history that comes along. That's the Vostok capsule from 1964 right there, which was Yuri Gagarin's space capsule. It has the rich historical dial work. What they're doing is they're going back and drawing from the timepieces that they built in the 60s, and they're pulling those dials forward with some slight updates and changes to make them a little bit more modern, but still to really speak to that history of the watch. I love would you call it gold? I'm not sure what that color is. It's almost like a...
Which color? The numbers?
The chapter ring, the numbers.
Oh, the number, mocha.
Like a mocha, that's a good way to put it, yeah. Which really is evocative of that vintage look.
Oh, yeah, they're much like the previous one. By the way, that one is barely hanging in there if you get the reference we showed you a couple of minutes ago. There is... How to word this properly? I am not implying that they're actually from the 1960s, but however they're doing it, it's this aged process or the way it's finished or whatever. And you combine that with a 42-millimeter case, you combine that with crystal shapes that would have been occurring in the early mid-1960s that you frankly do not see in real productions now to any extent. This is a beautiful
and that extra thick strap.
Watch. Yeah.
Very extra thick.
That's a sharp-looking watch right there.
Sharp.
Really is. For the record, TMI VK64 was the movement in that piece. 630921 is the item number. First payment. All right. Now, speaking of cool, we're going to get something that is brand new this show, and specifically, we are now going to look at the Sturmanskie 42 millimeter. This is, again, we showed you two of them a bit earlier this evening. It's such a beautiful homage to the 1960s builds, I think.
Absolutely.
This is beautiful work.
And again, for those of you who weren't watching earlier or aren't familiar, Sturmanskie was the first watch in space on the wrist of Yuri Gagarin, the only brand in the world that can say that. That alone is an amazing thing. But this particular piece, I picked this one for this to bring in there because of the dial work on this. This dial is an homage, or whatever terminology you prefer, to the original Strela watches. And this one is a part of the Open Space Collection, and the case back on this has Alexei Leonov, the image of Alexei Leonov. This dial on this one is very close to the dial of the watch he actually wore in his spacewalk, because it is an homage to the original Strela watches. Strela, which means arrow in Russian, was the watch that he wore on his spacewalk. So if you want to get that, that historical dial in your Sturmanskie watch, and you want to be the one that's going to be the most true to the watch that Leonov was actually wearing, this is the one to pick up, because that is the dial work that was done on the original Strelas built by the same company in that time period. Because this one does have the etched case back with Alexei Leonov outside the Vostok space capsule.
By the way, check out the space capsule.
I know, and that's just so cool.
This is...
And I love the date that's on there, and the fact that it shows the Vostok, and that's Leonov, the only living member of the original 5 Vostok cosmonauts. I mean, Sturmanskie is just steeped in nautical and space history, even to today. As you know, for those of you who know, the Mars watch, which by the way is sold out worldwide now. So those of you who do have the Mars in your collection, congratulations to you.
Because I don't.
Yeah, that is a fantastic timepiece, and it is
that.
the cosmonaut trainer. They are still providing watches as the trainer watches for the cosmonaut training program in Russia. So this is one, again, this is for the one, this is one you want, if you want that elegant timepiece with that great history, with that vintage look and homage to the vintage watches of the 60s.
There is such a, on one hand, the history to this is amazing, but on the other, just the physical elegance about it. I mean, you can know nothing about that this is even Russian origin. You just see somebody wearing that, and
well, you're certainly going to think they paid a lot more than this.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
and it looks like
sure.
you spent way more than $362 for it. That's a beautiful watch. Please enjoy that. That is a beautiful addition to anybody's